Welcome to a special episode of Dialogues of Transcendental Minds of Philosophy and Spirituality, where we bring together two giants of philosophical and spiritual thought for a conversation that promises to alter our perception of life and the universe. On the one hand, we have the Dalai Lama, the embodiment of compassion and spiritual leader of Tibet, whose life has been a demonstration of altruism and the search for peace through intercultural understanding and interreligious. On the other side, Jean-Paul Sartre, the icon of French existentialism, whose reflections on freedom and human isolation challenged our most basic notions of existence. In this meeting, we explore what happens when Buddhism, with its interconnected worldview and full of spiritual purpose, meets existentialism, which views human existence as devoid of inherent meaning but rich in possibilities for self-definition. The two paths may seem opposite, but both seek to answer the eternal question, how do we find meaning in our existence? The Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, is the 14th spiritual leader in the lineage of the Dalai Lamas of Tibet, an institution that dates back to the 17th century. His life was marked by the Chinese occupation of Tibet in 1959, which led to his exile. Since then, he has worked tirelessly to promote nonviolence and interfaith dialogue as a means to resolve conflicts, winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989. His teachings emphasize the importance of universal compassion, altruism, and scientific pursuit as foundations for global peace and human understanding. Jean-Paul Sartre, born in Paris in 1905, emerged as a prominent figure in 20th century French philosophy, especially after the Second World War. Sartre was a polymath who wrote extensively on philosophy, politics, literature, and aesthetics, being best known for works such as Being and Nothing, which articulate his philosophy of existentialism. He argued that human beings are condemned to freedom, responsible for giving meaning to their existence in an indifferent universe. Their life was also marked by a strong commitment to social and political issues, refusing the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1964 as a gesture of protest against traditional cultural institutions.
Professor Sartre, it is a great honor to discuss these fundamental questions with you, whose work has explored so deeply the human condition.
Your Holiness, the pleasure is mine. I am equally interested in learning how your faith addresses questions that, for many existentialists, seem to lead to a philosophical impasse.
Professor Sartre, in his philosophy, man is born into a universe where traditional meaning, imposed by external orders, is non-existent. In this void, each individual is free to create his or her own meaning. From a Buddhist perspective, although the universe does not prescribe a single spiritual path for everyone, it is intrinsically interconnected and full of potential for enlightenment. Thus, life, despite its inherent difficulties, offers a precious opportunity to develop compassion and wisdom through interactions with others.
Interesting, Your Holiness. I see that while Buddhism emphasizes interconnection and mutual responsibility, the existentialism I have proposed suggests a more isolated freedom. In my view, each being is thrown out into the world, faced with the absolute freedom to choose and define one's existence. This freedom is both liberating and a terrible burden, for every choice we make defines us and isolates us from others.
It's a deeply provocative perspective. In Buddhism, we emphasize that although we may feel isolated, we are actually part of a larger web of life, what you call being cast in the world. Every action we take has repercussions that transcend our individual understanding. Thus, meaning is constantly created not only through our individual choices, but also through our impact on others and the world.
That is a consoling view, and I see its value. However, at the heart of existentialism is the idea that there are no external guarantees for our choices. There is no inherent cosmological meaning that validates our decisions. Each person must face the absurdity of the universe and yet dare to invent meaning.
And herein lies an interesting convergence between our philosophies, Professor Sartre. Both recognize the freedom of the individual in the face of the vastness of existence. However, where existentialism sees an abyss of freedom and isolation, Buddhism sees an opportunity for deep connection and compassion. Perhaps in the end, our philosophies are not so far apart. Both are calls for the individual to act with awareness and courage, whether in creating meaning or aspiring to enlightenment. Professor Sartre, at the heart of existentialism is the belief in the absolute freedom of the individual. However, within Buddhism, we also discuss a form of freedom, but it is a freedom that recognizes the law of karma. Our past actions and intentions shape the circumstances of our lives, but do not completely determine our future choices. Thus, our freedom is exercised within a context of interdependence, where each choice reflects and affects the whole.
This is intriguing, as there seems to be a certain resonance with existentialism, despite fundamental differences. For me, the individual emerges into the world with no predefined essence and no excuses for his choices. Freedom is absolute, but with it comes the inescapable responsibility to shape our own essence through our actions. This is a fundamental isolation, where each person is fully responsible for themselves without the aid of a pre-existing moral order.
The Buddhist perspective sees this responsibility not as an isolated burden, but as a part of a shared journey. Freedom is understood not just in the ability to choose, but in the ability to choose wisely. The wisdom here is the deep understanding that we are all connected. Thus, our choices are guided by compassion and the desire to achieve freedom from suffering, not just for ourselves, but for all beings.
This is a valuable point of view, for although existentialism emphasizes individual freedom, it does not deny the existence of others. In fact, every action we perform is an act that projects our being in the world, and these actions inevitably touch the lives of others. Therefore, although we may be free, our freedoms are exercised in a shared world, where our choices have social and ethical resonances.
So we can see that both Buddhism and existentialism encourage deep reflection on the nature of freedom and responsibility. In the end, both call us to greater awareness of our actions and its consequences, albeit through different paths. Professor Sartre, within existentialist philosophy, you have deeply explored the concept of suffering as an intrinsic condition of human existence. In Buddhism, we also recognize suffering as an inevitable part of life, but though we see it as something that can be transcended through understanding, detachment, and compassion. How do you see that we can face and find meaning in suffering?
Your Holiness, for existentialism, suffering is often seen as an absurd, a meaningless condition that each individual must face alone. However, rather than seeking to transcend it, therefore, existentialism proposes that we must embrace suffering as a path to authenticity. By recognizing the inevitability of suffering, we can begin to shape our lives more deliberately and courageously, finding freedom even within the limitations imposed by it. Existence.
Interesting, Professor Sartre. I see that despite the differences in our approaches, there is an underlying similarity in how both philosophies view suffering as a catalyst for personal growth. In Buddhism, we encourage the transformation of suffering into a path to spiritual awakening. We believe that by cultivating wisdom and compassion, suffering can be a powerful motivating force for the search for enlightenment and freedom from the cycle of rebirth and death.
It makes me think, Dalai Lama, that perhaps there is more complementarity in our views than initially appears. In existentialism, we also value the individual's ability to transcend their circumstances through choice conscious. Even in the face of extreme suffering, the freedom to choose our attitude toward life can lead us to an authentic and responsible state of being.
Yes, Professor Sartre, and it is at this intersection between our philosophies that we can find a fruitful dialogue. Both approaches seek to empower the individual, not by ignoring suffering, but by facing it directly and using it as a means of achieving a greater understanding of oneself and the world. Professor Sartre, this dialogue has been an enlightening journey for me. Through our discussion, we have been able to explore the depths of the human condition, reflecting on freedom, suffering, and the search for meaning. I thank you deeply for this exchange of ideas, which has undoubtedly enriched my understanding and, I hope, that of our viewers.
Your Holiness, I am also grateful for the opportunity to dialogue with you. Your perspectives on compassion and interconnection have offered new light on my own reflections on freedom and existence. May our paths continue to inspire those who seek to better understand themselves and the universe around them.
With this exchange of wisdom between the Dalai Lama and Jean-Paul Sartre, we come to the end of another episode of the series, Dialogues of Transcendental Minds of Philosophy and Spirituality. This meeting reminds us that despite differences in our beliefs and perspectives, the search for understanding and meaning is a journey we all share. If this dialogue between two such influential figures has inspired you to reflect on your own life and the choices you make, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, Philosophy and Spirituality. Like this video and share it with someone who would also benefit from these deep perspectives. Not only does it help us reach more people, it also encourages broader dialogue about issues that affect us all. Stay with us as we explore other great minds and ideas in future episodes. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our encounters. And if you want to see more dialogue like this, leave a comment below with "More dialogue, please." Your participation is crucial as we continue our mission to enlighten and inspire. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery. See you in the next episode, where we continue to unravel the mysteries of philosophy and spirituality.